Old Jack always says, what the hell?
I know I've said it 100 times, but this time I really mean it. I wish Kurt Russell was my dad. When I was in high school, one of my more alternative friends showed me a movie called Big Trouble in Little China. I have to admit that the first time I watched it, I didn't really get the appeal, and it took me a really long time to come back to revisiting it. Fast forward years later, and the time has come for me to rewatch the movie and see if I connected with it, and lo and behold, yeah, kinda. I guess I kinda did. Big Trouble in Little China is one of those movies that you either love or you haven't seen. It seems to me that there really is no in between, because ultimately this movie is like the definition of a cult classic. And you guys are in luck, because if it's been a while or you haven't seen it all together, I've got an expert, Chris Bumbray, on the case to tell you what the f happened to Big Trouble in Little China.
I come from the video generation. While people today have their pick of whatever they want to see online, either legally or not, one can't say there's a lack of stuff available. In fact, I'd wager that no movie or TV series, no matter how obscure, is impossible to find. If you're looking hard enough, you can find anything. But let me take you back to a time before the internet, ladies and gentlemen. In the 80s, we had a thing called video stores, where you could rent videotapes for a day, and were limited by their inventory, which is why everyone had at least 2 or 3 video stores in their circuit to hit, as each place had different things. Without the internet, renting older movies was a real crapshoot, especially if they were obscure, but sometimes you'd find gold.
Point Break or Bad Boys 2.
Such was the case when, at 13 years old, I wandered into my local video store, walked to the action section, and picked up a VHS tape for a movie called Big Trouble in Little China.
Old Jack always says, what the hell?
Here in Canada, it never really aired on TV, but it starred Kurt Russell, a hero of mine, and that was good enough for me.
Son of a bitch must pay.
And no, at the time I didn't really know who John Carpenter was, but you can bet that once I saw this movie, I tracked down all of his films. More than anything, I was lured in by the Indiana Jones-style cover art, which seemed to promise some high adventure. Thus, when I popped it into my VCR, I was blown away by John Carpenter's action-packed and often hilarious pastiche of Hong Kong action cinema and supernatural fare.
Okay, here's the deal. I run interference, you bring up the rear. Can you handle that?
Can you?
I thought I had stumbled upon this amazing movie that no one else had seen until 1996, when I finally got my first computer and discovered that Big Trouble in Little China had a big enough fan base to be considered a cult classic. Since then, its reputation has grown so much that many folks might actually be surprised to learn that it was a big box office flop in 1986.
It's all in the reflexes.
So much so that the budgets for Carpenter's follow-up movies were slashed considerably. However, his creativity still made films like They Live and Prince of Darkness cult classics, just like this one. Big Trouble in Little China is the product of a whole range of influences. In the 1980s, there was a fascination in Hollywood with Asia, with many movies being made about the whole East meets West cliché, such as The Challenge, Forced Vengeance with Chuck Norris, Year of the Dragon, and even Eddie Murphy's The Golden Child.
I should be purged. I should be flogged. I don't deserve to walk amongst good clean people.
The genre would be essentially killed the following year when Sean Penn and Madonna did a movie called Shanghai Surprise that ended up being one of the biggest flops of the decade. Written by Gary Goldman and David Z. Weinstein, Big Trouble in Little China was originally a Western about a cowboy who teamed up with a Chinese railroad worker in order to rescue the latter's fiancée. It was W.D. Richter, the man behind The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, who updated the script, making the cowboy a blowhard trucker named Jack Burton.
I says, honey, I never drive faster than I can see. Besides that, it's all in the reflexes.
Carpenter, who was attempting to branch out into other genres beyond horror, had some success recently with Starman and was hired to direct, with the studio, 20th Century Fox, no doubt hoping this would be an Indiana Jones-style adventure movie. But had they even read the script? At the time, Kurt Russell, who had already made a few classics with Carpenter, was quickly rising in Hollywood, with him really having the look of an action icon. Yet the thing that attracted him, as well as Carpenter, to the project was how unconventional it was. Typically, there's a cliche where the white hero, in American movies anyway, saves the day and protects his Asian sidekick. Big Trouble in Little China inverted the formula.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack? I was born ready.
While a heroic lead, Burton is also a total klutz with his John Wayne-style swagger, covering up for the fact that he has absolutely no idea what's happening. But hey, At least he has the confidence to face whatever's thrown in his face.
And I'm a reasonable guy, but I've just experienced some very unreasonable things.
Instead, the sidekick, Dennis Dunn's Wang Chi, is the real hero, which is fitting as he has more skin in the game, with his green-eyed fiancée being kidnapped by the minions of the villainous sorcerer Lo Pan, who of course is brilliantly played by James Hong, so that she can be sacrificed and restore him to life. Jack would get a love interest of his own in Kim Cattrall's Gracie Law long before she was ever on Sex and the City, and just like Jack, she's a bit of a klutz and totally overwhelmed by what's happening around her.
Hey!
Sorry, I'm just thrilled to be alive.
Yeah, sure.
The whole movie benefits from a great ensemble, with the two comic relief characters, Donna Lee's Eddie and Kate Burton's Margot, also lovable in their own right, with their own little romance happening in the background of the film. Meanwhile, the great Victor Wong, who also showed up in Tremors, plays Egg Shen, a Chinatown sorcerer who is the heroic counterbalance of the evil Lo Pan, and who duels him in the amazing climax. Besides the humor, what arguably makes the film is the fact that Carpenter brought a real appreciation for the rhythms and style of what was happening in Hong Kong cinema at the time. This was a great moment for their films.
Follow the leader. 1, 2, 3. We may be trapped.
Supernatural action comedies, such as the ones directed by Tsui Hark, were in vogue at the moment, and Carpenter did a great job mixing their vibe with his own rougher-edge take on action, with some horror and sci-fi elements mixed in for good measure.
Goodbye, Mr. Burton. It's all in the reflexes.
The action sequences, which were choreographed by James Liu, are better than anything else Hollywood was offering up at the time. For evidence, one need only look at the failed English-language movies Jackie Chan was shoehorned into, such as The Big Brawl and The Protector, which were bargain basement at best. Carpenter had the rhythms down pat and wasn't afraid to get fanciful, with plenty of wire-fu. It helps that he himself, along with Alan Howarth, wrote one of the best action scores of the 80s, with it standing the test of time as the single best score he ever wrote. Those synth strings are fantastic. And I gotta say, the theme song by his band The Coupe de Villes, it's a banger too.
Is it getting hot in here, or is it just me?
Yet the movie was surprisingly a flop in the summer of 1986. It was rushed to theaters because it had competition from a similarly themed Golden Child, and at the time there was no bigger star on the planet than Eddie Murphy.
Come out no more. What? Huh? What'll come out no more?
The studio had no idea how to promote this, and they actually hid the fact that Russell was playing a mostly comedic character by having the classic Drew Struzan poster emphasize Russell's muscles and the gun he carries around for part of the movie.
Are you crazy? Is that your problem?
Interestingly, Jack Burton only actually kills 2 people in the film, and one of them is by accident.
First time you ever plugged somebody?
Of course not.
It made a terrible $11.1 million at the box office, and Fox gave up on it shortly after the opening because their big summer movie Aliens was on the way to theaters, and they wanted to put all their muscle behind it. However, the movie did benefit from coming out at the height of the VHS boom, but slowly and surely, folks started watching it on video and cable, with it eventually becoming a cult classic. When they recorded a memorably inebriated commentary track back in the year 2001 for the DVD, Carpenter and Russell were pleased at how the movie's cult had grown enough to afford it a special edition, with them remarking about how happy they were when people approached them in the streets and told them how much they liked it.
No, please, what is that? Don't tell me.
I wonder if they'd still feel that way, because I feel like a lot of people have come up to them talking about Big Trouble in Little China in the 20-some-odd years since they recorded this track. The cult, of course, only grew from there, with many of the movie's fans growing out to become movie stars, with Dwayne Johnson so massive a fan that he actually tried to do a legacy sequel at some point. Its influence has become gigantic, with Taika Waititi's reinterpretation of Thor, as played by Chris Hemsworth, heavily inspired by the film. Chris Pine's character in the recent Dungeons & Dragons movie also seems heavily inspired by Jack Burton, although he played the part as a little too smug for my liking, as Burton was a lot of things, but he wasn't smug. Perhaps its most lasting effect on the pop culture was how it influenced the designs of 2 Mortal Kombat characters, with Raiden based on the henchman Lightning, while Shang Tsung is based on Lo Pan. 39 years after it came out, Big Trouble in Little China finally has the classic status it always deserved, with it big enough now that you can't even really call it a cult movie anymore. Its rights now are owned by Disney, who are treating it like the crown jewel that it is, although they've yet to put it out on 4K, and it is long overdue.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
My thought, though, is that they're going to do something with this property, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got some kind of remake at some point sooner or later. But who knows? What's interesting about it is how well it plays with modern audiences, as it seems to embody all the best elements of the 80s without any of the drawbacks that mar certain films of the era. Hey, Carpenter and Kurt Russell aren't only still alive, but they're still pals. I'd say that Russell's just about as popular as he ever was. Is it too late for another ride on the Pork Chop Express? It's all in the reflexes.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.